Thank you, Acting President. I rise to speak on my motion 752 about sexual assault alternative reporting options. And just before I start my contribution, I'll be using the acronym ARO or ARO, Alternative Reporting Option, so not to be confused with the New South Wales SARO, S-A-R-O, which has had extensive media coverage and which is not necessarily best practice. There are many reasons why victims choose not to report a sexual assault against them, and these can include: I didn't think it was serious enough to report. I didn't want the perpetrator to go to jail or to know that I've made a police complaint. I've had bad relationships with the police in the past, so I wasn't too keen on talking to them. This is just the industry I'm in, it always happens, and I didn't know where to go to report this. Unfortunately, there are plenty more reasons. It's not for us to judge why someone does or doesn't report, but we do have an obligation to make sure that they have an accessible or alternative option to tell someone or to report the abuse. I've spoken in this place too many times to count about sexual assault, and especially about the lack of reporting and the lack of data collection. It's simple. We don't have enough reliable data on how widespread this issue is. I'll rattle off just two statistics today that will hopefully accentuate the problem of underreporting. The 2016 Personal Safety Survey found that 34% of women who did not report their most recent incident of sexual assault by a male perpetrator to police said it was because they did not regard the incident as a serious offence. Plus, the VLRC's report improving the justice system response to sexual offences, which recommended an RO, stated that about 87% of people who experience sexual violence do not report it to the police. In fact, only about half even seek support from someone, usually from family or friends. This proposal has also been discussed and recommended by many stakeholders and the victim survivor community for many years preceding the release of this report. It was just this month the major universities took part in the National Student Safety Surveys. It was once again damning. RMIT University found that, and I quote, more than 50% don't know where to go to make a complaint about sexual harassment or sexual assault, unquote. In this day and age, I find this response incredibly alarming. In response to a question without notice that I raised to the Attorney-General in late February, the government unfortunately remained non-committal to the recommendation of an RO. The motion I've introduced is very straightforward and is asking the government to do three things. Firstly, commit to implementing an online alternative reporting mechanism for sexual assault. Secondly, to begin an Engage Victoria consultation process, including roundtables with stakeholders to develop an evidence-based reporting option for sexual assaults. And thirdly, to table a report on the findings of the Engage Victoria consultation in this place by the 1st of September 2022. I may expect the government to say to the House today that there could not be enough time, or there may not be enough time, to conduct the consultation, especially in the time frame specified in the motion. However, precedent has been set through other Engage Victoria processes that will allow this timeline to be absolutely met. The property market review went for under 2 months. The review of Victoria's approach to illicit tobacco regulation was open for 3.5 months. The Aboriginal self-determination and education process had a timeline of 4 months. And to demonstrate how quickly the government can act on certain issues, it was 26th of November 2020 that former Attorney-General Jill Hennessy asked the Victorian Law Reform Commission to conduct the grab and drag review, just 8 days after the sentencing of Jackson Williams, and on the day that the e-petition with over 100,000 signatures was presented to Parliament. We asked them to commit to the same urgency that we know they have committed to in the past. We think this timeline is sound and achievable. One victim who wanted to use only her first name, we use a pseudonym, call her Ellie, was sexually assaulted by her friend's father when she was around 15 years old. Coincidentally, I worked with Ellie on another matter when I was at Socket, so it's a bit of a full circle for me. I helped her in the court process, and now I'm speaking about her implementing a law, which is quite surreal. But on the alternative reporting option, she said that she's fully supportive, saying, and I quote, "Reporting online is less traumatic and allows your emotions to not come to the surface until the person is ready. It allows control over my story, unquote. And this is what this emotion is essentially all about. I've had plenty of other feedback from sexual assault survivors, both young and historic, including a very brave young lady, Michaelia, who is here today and joined me this morning on the doorstep. And I won't rehash what all the victim survivor comments are, as I don't think I need to convince anyone here that this is what victim survivors want. New South Wales have had a sexual assault reporting option since 2012, and it was made more well known through, though, as a result of the Chantal Contos advocacy and Operation Vest. Whilst this particular model of an online reporting option isn't recognised as best practice, as some questions are not trauma-informed, it has had incredible successes since its implementation. Two examples that New South Wales Police shared with my office about its benefits, besides the obvious general intelligence gathering, include, firstly, with a string of drink spikings the SAROs made, New South Wales Police were able to get their liquor licensing division to work with venues cited in the report. They then were able to conduct training and information to managers and staff about how to spot and reduce sexual assaults and poor behaviour. Secondly, in one case New South Wales Police told us about, they had a survivor who had described her perpetrator in great detail and with a similar MO to a court case that was being put together by more than a handful of other victims. Long story short, with further investigation, the victim was added to the court case and they were able to get a prosecution, including for that victim's allegation. Whilst New South Wales Police make it clear that SARO is not about prosecutions, this would have been an incredibly fantastic feeling for that victim to receive some form of justice. The New South Wales SARO isn't best practice in its current form. For instance, you need to download and fill out a form, and some of the questions have been identified as slightly inappropriate by victims. However, New South Wales are currently undergoing a review of the way the SARO is set up and hope to have changes implemented this year. Queensland have an alternative reporting option run by their police, which is a modern online form. There are also examples of alternative reporting in Western Australia, the ACT, South Australia, Tasmania, as well as nationally and overseas. We're not proposing a DHJP model of a SARO, as there are many issues that need to be fleshed out properly. This has become evident through extensive consultation by my office for this motion. We recognise that the ideal way to create a best practice RO is to commit to adequate consultation and roundtables with key organisations and victims of crime. Some of the issues we have identified through speaking with stakeholders are the following. Firstly, who does the RO sit with and who manages it? And also, how does mandatory reporting of children intersect with this platform? In New South Wales, for example, their SARO front page makes it clear that if the report is about children, that the police must notify community services. Also, how does the issue of subpoenaed documents affect the alternative reporting options, if at all? And how do we give victims agency through the RO to control their story? And these are some of the questions we envisage that the Engage Victoria process will address asking stakeholders. In drawing up this motion, we have conducted extensive discussions with relevant and key organisations and people. And these include Victoria Police, Wendy Steedham, Assistant Commissioner, Family Violence and Sexual Assault, Lauren Callaway, Assistant Commissioner, Family Violence, Sexual Assault, Child Abuse, Julian Goldrick, Detective Inspector, Stranger-Based Violence. Academics such as Patrick Tidmarsh, who trains police in sexual abuse investigations. Georgina Hayden, who's here with us also today, present in the gallery. And Sophie Hines from RMIT University. Thank you very much for your feedback. They are both currently investigating best practice for alternative reporting options. Victim survivors, both in the younger and historic child sexual assault demographics. And thanks once again, Michaelia, very brave young woman. And various agencies, including Sexual Assault Services Victoria, Sexual Assault and Family Violence Centre, with a letter of support from their CEO, Helen Bolton, and of course Child Safe Strategy CEO Debbie Boyce, who's also here today in the gallery, and thank you for your support. And many others who have been invited to take part in this consultation. The Victims of Crime Commissioner also in her submission stated, and I'll quote, in relation to the SARO, and I'll quote, given the individual and structural barriers faced by some victims of crime to reporting a crime, Anonymous and confidential reporting options should be available as part of a suite of options for victims of sexual assault, so that victims can engage with the justice system in a way that best meets their safety and justice needs. And that is just a classic example of how much we need this alternative reporting option sooner rather than later. So in conclusion, I don't think that this motion is controversial in any respect. I think that we as policymakers do have an obligation to support victim survivors of sexual assault, and this is one way that we can absolutely do that. Rather than just speak about it, we can actually do something. We'll conclude by quoting the Attorney-General, who said in response to a question I asked earlier this year, and I quote, "We, the government, want to have a state where those that experience sexual offending can come forward and report these crimes," unquote. And I absolutely agree with this statement. Therefore, I don't see what is holding up the consultation and implementation of an alternative reporting option. We need to stop sitting on our hands and show that we stand with victims of crime and just get this done. I commend this motion to the House.